Good evening, everybody, and welcome to our 38th season special season preview live stream. My name is Cody Martin. I'm the Director of Education at Pensacola Opera, and we are so excited to share just a little bit about what we have planned for the upcoming main stage season. It's hard to believe, but we really haven't done any live in-theater performances since February. The last one that we did at Pensacola Opera was our Easy to Love concert back on February 13th. So it's been, wow, we're going on 9 months that we have not performed in a theater. And of course, with the ongoing pandemic, there are many things that we are taking into consideration and planning around in order for us to be able to continue going forward with our main stage season. And that, in addition to the pieces and the casts and whatnot, are what I'm going to share tonight. Just a brief overview of what we have planned and how the preparations are underway. So first off, of course, the obvious question is, how are we going to be returning to in-person performances inside a theater? And the answer to that question is with lots of precautions, lots of thought, and lots of help from our partners over at the Sanger Theater. First off, and probably most obviously, is that the audience sizes for our performances at the Sanger Theater will be limited. There are just around 1,500 seats at the Sanger, and for each performance, we will have just under 400 seats available in the theater. So, very low capacity. We're going to be spacing out. Every other row is blocked off, and between parties, there will be at least a couple of seats so that we can maintain the social distancing throughout the entire audience. Audience members will be required to wear masks the whole entire time they're in the theater throughout the performance. The orchestra is going to be smaller in scale than we usually have. They will be seated, spaced out, and they will actually be on stage. I'll show you a picture of that in a little bit, what that might look like. Same thing with the chorus. It's a reduced number in the chorus. They will also be on stage, spaced apart from each other, not coming into any close contact. Backstage, there are lots of considerations. We're limiting one singer per each dressing room so that everybody can have their own space. And anybody who's backstage moving around will be wearing a mask. That will be very strictly enforced. Anytime the singers leave the stage, they have to put their mask on. They won't remove it again until right before they come on stage. And in addition to all of the in-theater performances that we will be doing, if there is anybody who is not comfortable with returning to the live theater, we will be offering for the first time live stream performances for all of our main stage productions. Those tickets are just going to be $25 per production, and the Sanger Theater has purchased some equipment and multiple cameras, so it's going to look really good, and it's going to be live streamed, so it's just as if you were in the theater. You'll get a link in your email. You can click it, and you can watch the performance along with us at home, and that'll be available for all of our main stage performances. The first production we're planning, which we're very excited for, is Carmen, which is going to be in January. Just a little bit about the piece, a little background. Composed by Bizet, this piece premiered in March of 1875 in Paris at the Opéra Comique, and it's based on a novella of the same name by Mélimée. It's categorized as an opera comique because it contains musical numbers that are separated by dialogue. Now, back in this time, the French operas were all categorized, and that, whichever category they were in determined which theater they would be premiered at. So opera comiques had the dialogue mixed in between the musical numbers, and then that ran all the way up to French grand opera, which was fully sung through, usually with a full ballet somewhere in the piece. Which is interesting to think of Carmen, which is such a big piece. There's such a big chorus, a large orchestration usually, lots of characters. It's funny to think that something so grand would not be considered French grand opera. Interestingly, during the initial run of Carmen, so it opened in March, and then Bizet actually died in June of 1875. During the initial run of Carmen, he was only 36 years old. He died of heart disease. It was very tragic, but of course, his legacy lives on through Carmen and all of his other works as well. In October of that same year, 1875, a new version for Vienna was premiered, and this included recitatives in place of the dialogue. And those were composed by Guiraud, a different composer. And so nowadays we kind of have these two versions. We have the version with recitative, and then we have the version with dialogue. And you'll see them both performed here at Pensacola. We will actually be doing the original version with dialogue, not with the recitatives. And the dialogue will all be spoken in French with super titles. Just a little context of how popular Carmen is. During the 2018-19 season, it was the 5th most produced opera around the world. There were 129 productions and over 500 performances throughout that season. So it's an important work. Everybody knows it. Everybody loves it. And it's one of our favorites here. We're excited to get back to it. Just a little bit about the story, a brief synopsis in 60 seconds or less, I would say. We follow the story of Don José, who is a soldier, and he falls into the clutches of Carmen, who is an enchanting gypsy woman. And because he's under her spell, he ends up leaving behind his dying mother, his childhood sweetheart, Micaela, and he deserts his military duties, completely goes AWOL, just to follow Carmen around the countryside. Only to see her in Act 2 and 3 shift her glances toward Escamillo and away from him. So she actually leaves him and goes to be with Escamillo, who is a well-known bullfighter in Seville. And then at the end, in a fit of jealous rage, Don José ends up stabbing and killing Carmen outside of the arena where the bullfight is taking place. So that's a really brief synopsis of the entire opera. Lots of action, lots of passionate music and passionate scenes between all of the characters. It's really a great piece. Talking about the music specifically, Carmen has given us some of the most well-known melodies and some of the most beautiful, exciting, impassioned music in all of opera. Two pieces from Carmen are very well known, and they have been used in television commercials, movie soundtracks, instrumental works, the list goes on. And the first of these is, of course, Carmen's entrance aria, her Act 1 Habanera. So I'm just going to play the opening theme from the Habanera. Now, the Habanera, interestingly, is when Bizet was composing this, he heard a Spanish song called El Arreglito by a composer named Iradier. And he heard this piece. He didn't know that it was actually a song by a composer who was alive at the time. So he thought it was just a folk song. So he kind of mimicked this piece and turned it into what was the Habanera. And he initially labeled it as a folk song. And then once he learned that this piece actually was a song by a living composer at the time, he put a note into his score and credited Iradier. But if you listen to the song El Arreglito, it's uncanny. It's obvious, very obviously the inspiration for the Habanera. The other piece that is pretty well known, most people would recognize the melody at least a little bit, is the Torador song. And this is, of course, the entrance of Escamillo in Act 2. And this motif, this melody, is introduced at the very beginning of the opera in the overture. And we actually hear it a few times throughout the piece. We hear it when the Torador comes in. We hear it later when people are going off stage. It's a really great melody, and it's really memorable. So let's listen to just the main melody from the Torador song. L'amour dato Yeah, that's a piece that you'll hear once, and then you'll walk around humming it forever. It really gets stuck in your head. It's a real earworm. One thing to note about the music, which you probably heard in the Habanera, and it happens throughout the piece, is that Bizet really incorporated some Spanish elements throughout the score. Of course, he had the Spanish song that he used for inspiration for the Habanera. We have lots of castanet usage. There's actually a scene where Carmen dances for Jose and she plays the castanets on stage, and then it comes back through some of the interludes and whatnot. The seguidilla, which we'll hear in a minute, is actually inspired by flamenco music. In Act 1, whenever Carmen is held captive by Jose, she sings her Tra-la-la-la song, and that is inspired by a Spanish folk song as well. The seguidilla I'm going to play next. This is, as I said, inspired by flamenco, and this is going to be at the end of Act 1. Carmen has been captured by Jose for starting a fight in the cigarette factory, and he's holding her prisoner. And in this scene, she kind of, persuades him to let her go, so that she can go and dance the night away at Lilas Pastias Tavern. And this is going to be a performance actually recorded by our 2020-21 artist in residence, Aaron Alford, who will be with us in January. And I'm playing the piano in this recording, and we actually recorded this remotely. So I recorded the piano accompaniment here in Pensacola. I sent it to her all the way in California. She put in a headphone and listened to the accompaniment while she sang along to it. And then we edited it together and we got this performance. So this is going to be the seguidilla from the end of Act 1 of Carmen.